What's up, ladies and gents, Nolly here. Welcome to another Payday video. I've been neglecting the channel a little bit lately, I realised, so I thought I'd treat you to one of my favourite builds that I have just made very recently. It was initially supposed to be a just for fun build, but it turns out it's actually pretty damn powerful in practice, so it's almost teetering on the edge of getting my Death Wish seal of approval. It's certainly viable for the difficulty, but there are better builds out there if you're looking to min-max on Death Wish. So, like I said, the channel's not been my main priority just as of late. I'm going to be moving to university very, very soon, and so the focus has got to be on that. But, you know, I had time to mess around with some builds, and especially with the Chivalry pack, which I have enjoyed, and I thought I'd create one based off that DLC. Of course, if you don't have this DLC, this build is not one that you can necessarily create or recreate as I have it, but some of the skills and perks and ideas behind it will translate. Now, if you guys are interested in seeing my initial impressions and a sort of mini review of the Chivalry pack to consider whether or not you want to pick up this DLC, that link is in the description below. These two videos kind of go hand in hand because without one, the other is less applicable. But just quick thoughts here after I've played with it for even longer. Basically the same thing. Stylish, load of fun, but not nearly as powerful as some of the DLCs we've seen recently within the Payday meta. So let's start things off by showing you the weapons and equipment. If I show you the skills and perks, it will kind of give those away anyway. So here we have the English Longbow. The English Longbow. So here we have the English Longbow. Probably the best weapon out of all three, as much as I enjoy the heavy crossbow. I've come to my senses now, and the English Longbow is probably the best one for you guys to try out. All the stats seem really good. You'll see some of the skills coming into play. We have increased total ammo. The rate of fire at 300 is kind of misleading because this weapon has further charge up time if you want the bolt to go very far, or the arrow in the case of the longbow, I should say. It's got really good base damage, good accuracy, stability, concealment, and threat. Basically, all this weapon's stats on paper look pretty damn awesome. In practice, it's not as powerful, but it certainly still has a lot of potential. Like I said, we have the explosive tip arrows. If I just modify it, you'll see that these will give you a free 200 damage by the looks of things. So why not use them? Well, there are two reasons why you may consider not using the frag rounds. Which is what I'm going to slip into calling them anyway, just because out of habit, really, even though they're explosive tipped. So, the first being that you no longer have a headshot multiplier. Headshot multipliers are really useful against some of those harder enemies to kill, cloakers, tasers, and bulldozers, and it's going to really help you out with most weapons. But from my experience with the longbow, it has 650 base damage plus the 200, meaning that if you're hitting a meat shot with the explosive tip rounds, that's 850 damage, and that's plenty. There are very few enemies, even on Death Wish, that won't one-shot as long as you're hitting them in the body. The other thing you lose out on is your ability to pick up the arrows once you fire them. That really is a minor problem. When you've got 44 arrows already, plus you've got 2 ammo bags, we're giving this away a little bit, you bring 2 ammo bags along, and you can drop those down for 15 seconds of not depleting that ammo at all. The ammo will be perfectly fine, even with the explosive tip rounds. So that's how I recommend you run the longbow. There are 1,000,001 pros to run it, which we'll talk about when you see a bit of gameplay later on. Let's move on to the secondary. It is, of course, the locomotive 12 gauge. When you see the build, it's got a load of shotgun skills in it. When I was looking for a secondary for this build, I wanted to make it thematic. I wanted a sort of oldie-timey build to go with my oldie-timey warrior. I thought maybe the pistol crossbow, that's kind of futuristic in and of itself. So I thought about the Peacemaker, but let's be honest, how many Enforcer Technician builds have ever worked with pistols? Not very many, so we had to go with the locomotive. I'll be honest, this isn't a thematic part of the build, this is not as fun, but it is just one of the things that makes the build more powerful and more viable on the harder difficulties. The locomotive is an incredibly good shotgun, best in the class for the secondary weapons at least, and you can't go wrong with it really. Next up, though, we have the melee weapon. Now, I decided to go thematic here and go with the Morningstar. I could have gone for the katana. It is the best melee weapon in the game right now. But I do think the Morningstar has some pros that the katana doesn't have. Though the damage is not comparable, it's still not bad at all, and the swing rate's really, really good on the Morningstar. And on top of that, it's got very high knockdown, which can be really very useful for the Death Wish difficulty, where you can't cut through the enemies nearly as quickly, and you're best just incapacitating them and taking them out with your primary weapon of choice. Next up, another sort of thematic choice, the Javelin. I like this weapon, I really do, but it's unwieldy, difficult to use, and requires a lot of practice. You're not going to be using this just to take out regular enemies. The main use is to take out cloakers, possibly tasers, and even bulldozers once you've shattered that mask. So it's not a bad pickup, but if you want to make this build as good as possible, I'd probably consider changing it to the Molotov or the Dynamite. Next up, we have the improved tactical vest, or combined tactical vest, I should say, as the armor of choice. The ammo bag is our equipment, and that's it for weapons and equipment. Next up, we have skills and perks, of course. So, moving on over to the Mastermind, I always like to pick up endurance, even on these slow Enforcer Technician builds. I still think it's a useful skill. I really get frustrated, run out of breath all the time. As you can see, the bulk of our points are in Enforcer, so moving on up, we have all the standards, Transporter, Pumping Iron. I love Melee, and it's really going to make that Morningstar a bit more powerful. Underdog, Die Hard, these are primarily just to push us up to further skills, but as I've already mentioned, we have Bullet Storm. It's so good with the English Longbow. When you place an ammo bag, you get 15 seconds of free fire. Now, the English Longbow says it has 300 fire rate, which isn't entirely true. Like I said, you have to draw it back a bit further, so it does fire slightly slower than that. But compared to the crossbows added in the DLC, it fires much, much faster. If you drop down an ammo bag and walk into a group, you will take out that whole group no problem. You won't expend any of your precious, precious ammo, because of course you can't pick any up with this build. And you won't have to think about the reloading animation. It's really, really very effective. Like I said, we have Underdog, we have Die Hard. Die Hard's very useful in Tech Forcer simply because it gives you an increased armor recovery rate and you're going to be relying on your armor. I like Tough Guy. Just a sort of throwback to all the Call of Duty games I've played in the past. Camera shake is very, very irritating. View kick pisses me off. Next up, we fully ace out stun resistance. Same reason. Flashbangs are almost as irritating as view kick, probably more irritating in fact. Get rid of them with stun resistance. Shotgun impact. Got to ace that out. We're using the locomotive secondary, so the main focus should be on the locomotive. Bearing in mind, we need absolutely no skills, really, to make the English Longbow stronger. All I would say is Bullet Storm and Ammo Specialist, which we're probably already going to get anyway. Fully loaded is a decent pickup, not only for the locomotive, but mainly for the English Longbow, giving you 9 more shots in every set of ammo you pick up. So I do advise you pick that up for just 4 points. Iron Man, we need that for the tactical vest. And finally, Overkill. Make that locomotive just a little stronger, and it's what makes shotguns powerful. Moving on over to Technician, we zoom up the right-hand side. One of my biggest gripes with Technician is you have to pick up skills you don't want unless you're using sentry guns or C4, which is just sad because we have to use the ammo. So we pick up things like Rifleman, Sharpshooter. No real application. We have to pick up Demolition Man. These skills are more useful. Nerves of Steel, Hardware Expert, Drill Sergeant. Silent Drilling is not going to do much for us, but then I ace out Shockproof. This is really helpful. This is a fun skill that does have some application on other builds, but I would say particularly when using the longbows or the any of the bow type weapons that don't auto reload or only reload a single shot, I should say, when you're being tased. Shockproof is great. The backfire effect on tasers is, first of all, a great grace period where you can hopefully take them out, but if that doesn't work, you lose your single longbow shot. You can easily interact with the taser as they're shocking you and knock them down. Not only will that deal a bit of damage to them, it'll also immediately break the shock effect and mean that the one and only real downside to the longbow is totally nullified. So that's why I say Shockproof is a must-have on this build or any sort of build using those weapons. Next up, we have Bulletproof. You're going to want to basic this out no matter what. If you go for the improved combined tactical vest, please do pick this up. Ghost, there's a sort of decent set of skills you can drop points into. These are really where the remainder of the points go. Every build you're going to want to pick up Sprinter and Fast Hands, but I put a single point in Cat Burglar, Cleaner, and Martial Arts because they all do a little something for me. Particularly Martial Arts, like I said, big focus on melee even in this build. Finally, a couple of points in Fugitive and Thick Skin. Free steadiness, whatever. Don't know where else to put the points, so drop them there. The perk deck, this is really important. There are a bunch of choices that you can make. Muscle and Armor aren't bad perk decks these days, but I personally feel like the Sociopath is the best perk deck for this build. You are going to take reduced damage, which is great, particularly on the harder difficulties, and that's only when you're within medium range or closer. But that is basically the effective range of this build. Yeah, the Longbow does have some usefulness over range, but we're looking for close range explosive damage, shotgun damage, and melee damage. So you're going to be up close and personal no matter what. On top of that, tension means that killing enemy regenerates armor. This is really useful when you're using a massive armor supply like the improved combined tactical vest. It's going to allow you to keep topping that up as long as you're still killing. And it synergizes really nicely with the idea that we stop having to reload, stop depleting ammo on the Longbow, and we just get amongst enemies and keep getting kills. And that is the same for the Overdose skill. That's going to do the exact same thing, so meaning every enemy you kill, 60 armor. Not bad at all. Another important skill is Clean Hit, meaning that we can regenerate a bit of health. The one downside of this build is there's no regeneration except for this, so wherever possible, try and get a kill with the Morning Star. That's going to give you 10% of your health back. That can happen every 2 seconds. Showdown's also quite useful. I found the panic effect to be way more powerful than it once was, and so I think it's a really nice boon when picking up this perk deck. So that's the build. Let's take a look at some gameplay. Okay, so in terms of gameplay, we're going to be taking a look at 2 heists in particular. One group heist doing the Hoxton Revenge heist on Overkill, and that's more of a standard gameplay test. The other is me trying to push this build to its limits. It's Solo Deathwish, Armored Transport, Park Heist. The reason, by the way, that I love the Park Heist for doing solo weapon testing is that there are no snipers, and they're an absolute nightmare for some builds. And this one included. Snipers are a pain because you either have to be very close or rely on really precise shooting, and so that's why you see it over there. But the build really, it doesn't buckle. Or I should say it buckles but it doesn't break on Deathwish. It's certainly pushed to its limits, but I think you get to see the real power of Sociopath, frag rounds, killing really quickly. To me, this is a newer, slightly slower version of the old Grinder setup. Of course, with Grinder, you were regenerating health. Here, you're regenerating armor. With Grinder, you didn't have to kill. It was just about shooting and hitting. And of course, Grinder is still a thing, and it's still reasonably powerful. But this is probably more powerful than Grinder at this stage, particularly for the armored builds, which are that little bit stronger right now, if you ask me. I still think Dodge is really, really good and may edge it out on some heists, but I do think armor is back in there, and I think the overall game balance is looking much better. I just don't know why Overkill decided to ignore the Hitman perk deck. But anyway, I digress. Let's focus back up on the gameplay. And as you can see, it's all about getting amongst the enemies and repeatedly killing. The difficulty is, whereas with a lot of my other builds that focus around this, or grinder builds, you're looking for fast fire rate, quick shooters. Whereas here, it's more about slow, deliberate shots and making sure you hit your targets. The main thing I aim to do with the bow, unless I'm shooting over very long range, is actually hit for the floor. You're not going to get full damage, and the damage drop-off is actually really severe. You go from 850 to about 160 in a matter of a foot, I would say, in-game distance, or half a meter roughly. So that is a very severe damage drop-off, but the pros you gain from that are absolutely massive. You get knockdown, you get splash damage, of course, and it's just much more useful firing into groups that way, because you're going to stun enemies and you're also going to whittle them down. I personally would rather take 2 shots to kill a group of 3 by aiming at their feet twice, than take 3 shots but get the 1-shot kill on each one individually. That's the mindset you have to think when using this weapon, and it should be quite effective. One thing to note though is you're not looking for multi-kills with this build all the time necessarily, because you're not going to be able to make use of your sociopath skills, bearing in mind that can only proc every couple of seconds. So you got to be careful with how you run the build. Of course, if you're in a pinch, swap out to that locomotive. You will tear through groups as soon as overkill is set up and ready. If you come up against particularly difficult specials to deal with, admittedly on Death Wish, cloakers are really hard for the Longbow to deal with because you can't one-shot them as far as I can tell. The numbers certainly wouldn't suggest that much. So you're going to have to look to use the locomotive or potentially even the javelin, because that thing does have really high damage, especially if you hit the headshot multipliers. So one thing to note is that bulldozers, it's 2 shots with the longbow, then the helmet's gone, then swap to either it's 2 javelin throws after that, or 2 locomotive shots to the head. I think that does it on Death Wish and Overkill. Death Wish might take another shot or another javelin. Remember, the javelins are so difficult to use. Make sure you've set up your aim beforehand and you're in line when you're throwing. It's incredibly hard to pull the javelin across and adjust at the last minute. It's probably going to fly elsewhere and you'll lose it forever. Of course, when it comes to buying assets, you got no health regen other than melee kills. You should try and fit melee kills in wherever possible. Do pick up med kits, and hopefully if you're playing with a team, someone else will bring some sort of quick, easy healing. My favourite is when they bring along first aid meds. That's probably the most useful setup for this build, because you're going to be keeping your armour regened at all times. It's nice to keep a second barrier of health up wherever possible, and of course the first aid meds are the easiest way and fastest and I suppose cheapest to do exactly that. And of course you're going to want to pick up ammo bags wherever possible, because ammo, even though I guess with your full ammo setup you got 200 plus shots from your longbow, as long as your teammates aren't picking up ammo, you can never have enough, and I always recommend trying to bring as much ammo as possible when you can't pick up floor ammo for the longbow, and of course you can't pick up your arrows when you're using frag rounds. These things are all really self-explanatory. I'm sure you guys will know exactly how to execute this build perfectly. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm going to leave you with a little bit of gameplay, I think. And I think that's all I have to say. It's a really fun build. Remember, you've got to pick up the Chivalry pack if you want to make full use out of this. And as I've said, it's powerful, it synergizes nicely. But the one thing I want to stress the most, and the one thing that Payday is all about for me when it comes to making new builds, is the fun you're going to have with it. I love sending enemies ragdolling from across the map. It looks crazy, it looks silly, and I'd say that's what this build is about. This is the quintessential silly build that ended up being a little more powerful than I initially expected. Do try it out, guys, if you've got the Chivalry pack. I hope you've enjoyed this build video. Other builds coming out later on, probably in this month. We've got a sort of perfected samurai build coming along, and other than that, updates coming up on the 23rd, I believe, of this month, and of course Crime Fest moving into October. Those are the things we've got planned for the channel. As I mentioned at the start, I'm going to uni very soon, so there may be another small lull in content, but hopefully I can keep it up over the time. I'll see you guys in the next video. Hope you've enjoyed.
Let's ready up and back to work.
That's a taser.
Gear up. We got a badass police force coming in.
Taser's history!
Time to say goodbye. You were useful for a while, but now, adios, clown fox.
Now brace for it. All right, guys, get that door open. Let's see who's in there.
Ready or not?